A duality exists in the culture of Philadelphia basketball that can be both slightly terrifying and also endearing. And if you're under their umbrella, you're going to be deeply cherished and championed. But the trade-off is that you're likely going to be deeply scrutinized. I think you could easily make the argument that no player embodies that duality like the 26-year-old Joel Embiid, the longest tenured 76ers player and in the discussion for best center on planet Earth. He has at times enthralled and enraged Sixer fans. Absolutely hilarious and unafraid to say or do just about anything, but also the occasional bully who's hell-bent on humiliating his opponents.
That's what I like doing. I like kicking people's ass and letting them know that they suck.
The retooled 76ers are 17-7, and that's being driven by the exceptional play of Embiid. He's posting averages of 29.3 points per game, 10.7 rebounds. He's posting a true shooting percentage of 68, which is just shy of
69%.
And his PER mark of 31.4 is tops in the NBA. Folks are even throwing MVP around. But how much of this is sustainable? Is there a way for him to level up yet again? I think it's time we talked Embiid.
Oh, indeed.
Joel Embiid has been a high-impact player in the NBA from day one, on both ends. Defensively, he's clever, he takes it personally, and he's a major deterrent on the back line. He's blocking fewer shots this season, but he's also fouling less than ever, which helps him stay on the floor. Embiid is the type of player who seems to get more athletic the longer he's moving, and for this reason, guards or bigs who can get off the floor quickly around the rim can find bits of success, if they have the courage to challenge him at all. Joel's basketball Big Bang moment was when a mentor gifted him a DVD of Hakeem Olajuwon highlights. And man, oh man, is that apparent. Embiid isn't as high-motored or as active over wide spaces as Hakeem, but he's a terrific athlete for his size. It's one thing to have that information in front of you. It's another to have the rare alignment of extraordinary size. Embiid is 7 feet tall, 280 pounds with a 7'5" wingspan, but he also has savvy feet and deft touch to absorb that info and put it to use. Maybe his days of soccer educated his feet. Maybe volleyball softened those hands. Whatever the case, it took. Like Hakeem, Joel especially loves the high post, but he's much more powerful, and his ability to blend his face-up ISO attack and back-to-the-basket game is fluid and nuanced. The face-up post game has really fallen out of style in the past 10 years. In the 2009-10 season, 80 players logged at least 10 of these possessions. In the 2019-20 season, that number was cut by more than half, down to only 34. If you're going to face the basket at all inside the three-point line, you'd better be pretty damn good at it. Joel Embiid is, and this season he's been especially terrific. It's unclear exactly why, but he is really shooting it this season. Through 19 games, he's up 17% on all mid-range attempts over last season. For that reason, his command of trickery while threatening to shoot makes it harder and harder for defenders to stay down. Like any effective big player, defenders are constantly jumping in front of him, looking for fouls, like pedestrians looking for a court settlement, but I'm frequently struck by how balanced he happens to be. It's an odd example, but watch Embiid get the switch here and try to exploit it. Kyle Lowry tries to pull the chair on him and get the foul call here, and not only does Embiid avoid losing his balance, he's able to lunge forward, reclaim the ball, and draw a foul for his team. It's all about controlled power, carving out space without bowling defenders over. Joel's typical routine here is to cycle the ball around and dare the defender to reach just before he throws a number of fakes. Robert Williams doesn't bite here, so Joel decides to drive right across the middle. Watch how even though he's beaten to the spot, Embiid, at that size, is able to hit the brakes and gather himself enough to pump fake his defender into the air, drawing a foul. All of these traits and more combine to create the most maddening aspect of defending Embiid, and that is the foul drawing. He has become a master at it. He's getting up just over 11 free throw attempts per game this season and shooting 85%. The poet Rico Ricci taught us that if you ain't got no haters, you ain't poppin'. In a way, I think this is also true of the NBA. If you don't draw focused defensive attention, you probably aren't poppin'. Because of his stellar post game, no player has been hard double teamed on post-up plays more frequently than Joel Embiid in the past 2 seasons, and I think that this is the next frontier of his development. I don't consider Embiid a selfish player. He's a willing passer, but I think that there are some obstacles preventing him from maximizing his impact in this area. First of all, I think Joel can be somewhat careless with the velocity, timing, or placement of his passes. It shows up on lazy inbound passes, entry passes, kickouts to shooters. With passing, you're going to hear people talk a lot about this idea of on time, on target. Off-target passes cost you time, lost time costs you quality looks, and lost quality looks cost you points. The second is that when the extra pressure does come, Embiid is not always the most patient or alert improviser, and that can lead to some head-scratching moments. Often it can be as simple as taking a beat and surveying what is actually happening on the floor instead of knee-jerk reacting to where he thinks his teammates should be. This has, historically, been a principal way to combat Embiid's face-up and foul-drawing game. The doubles cut down on the fouls that he draws in single coverage, and they make his decisions tougher. On this play, Philly has 4 reasonably good three-point shooters around Joel, so with a double team this hard, and Trae Young being on the floor, an open shot should be possible. Maxey lifts away from the play, and Korkmaz tells him to lift no further. Collins immediately comes to double, and Mike Scott, simple basketball play here, instinctively trails him as a cutter. If Scott stays still, DeAndre Hunter is able to zone up the weak side and play 2 men. Because of the cut, Embiid should simply fake this pass to Scott and create a great look for Danny Green. Instead, he throws it to the Sixer bench. Now, I'm not trying to be negative, and I want to acknowledge a couple things. The first is that although there are a bunch of plays like this, there are also a good amount of plays where Joel does make a good decision. It's not all bad. The second thing I'd like to point out is how ridiculous it is that he's this good to begin with. He went from towering, rail-thin 16-year-old in Cameroon who was so unskilled that he couldn't even participate in the scrimmages at the NBA's 2011 Basketball Without Borders camp to a top 3 draft pick in 3 years. 3 years! That rapid development is interesting to measure against the paths of a couple of similar, but also rare cases. Hakeem Olajuwon and Tim Duncan, specifically. Both elite defenders, both mid-range, face-up, score-first centers who came to the game late because they grew up in countries where other sports were more culturally prevalent and impressed on kids at a young age.
You didn't start playing basketball till 1978. Gee whiz, that's only 12 years ago.
But I was playing some other sports, so it was very easy for me to make the transition.
Primarily what, soccer?
Soccer and also volleyball, hockey, all kind of sports.
This makes you wonder, do their examples give us any kind of idea of how much Embiid could grow? Using passer rating, a metric created by my buddy Ben Taylor over at Thinking Basketball that measures the difficulty and effectiveness of passes, we can see from Joel's arc from ages 22 to 26 that he has the chance to thread the needle between them. Duncan and Olajuwon were both highly intelligent players, and as their supporting casts improved, they improved in turn as passers. Embiid has seen his situation improve. How much will that enable him to grow? Even if he only enjoys even moderate success in growing his game in this area, he's going to be one of the most unstoppable players in basketball. As amazing as JoJo's story is, I have my doubts that Sixer fans are going to want to be satisfied walking away from the process saying, "Man, what a great developmental story." They want to win. And look, this has been an up and down ride. In the past 4 seasons, they went from, "That's a fun young team, good for them," to, "Damn, these dudes are actually going to kick down the door early," to,
"Do you think I'm that hard to work with?"
to, "This is fucked." When Sam Hinkie took the reins in 2013, the goal was to get great players through brute sucking and then drafting force. And in Embiid and Simmons, they did. But when you take the best players available, you're shooting first and you're asking questions later. For Philly, the biggest question that came later was,
will it blend? That is the question.
Winning has quieted that conversation to a murmur lately, but the challenge of Simmons and Embiid remains a tricky one because among the star tandems in the NBA, their on-court fluidity is among the clunkiest. As good as their offensive games can be compartmentalized from one another, neither player naturally flows into what the other one does. We know about Joel, dominant post scorer who can't consistently exploit his gravity, whereas Simmons is a gifted passer and driver for his size, but he lacks the shot creation to pull any uphill gravity whatsoever. This past season, over 70% of his field goal attempts were at the rim. That makes it more difficult for him to be a consistent cutter, and it often has him pulling an extra defender into Joel's passing lanes. Most great offenses orbit around effective pieces that fit together. Because this isn't really the case, you'd think that it'd be obvious that surrounding Simmons and Embiid with as much shooting and creation as possible is the way to go. The good news, however, is that they did a lot to address this in a short amount of time. It basically took Daryl Morey a few days in the fall of 2020 to waltz in and not only identify their issues, but quickly tackle them.
That cab has a dent in it.
Very capable pieces were added. They flipped the declining Al Horford for the spacing and defense of Danny Green, added a mobile shooter and light load pick and roll handler in Seth Curry, drafted a potentially dynamic scorer and someday playmaker in Tyrese Maxey, and to top it all off, they managed to supplement the team's front court depth with Dwight Howard and Tony Bradley. Not to mention, they did an entire coaching staff swap out by bringing in Doc Rivers. But will that ultimately be enough? When it comes to knocking off the teams that will inevitably be there, the Bucks, the Nets, the Celtics, and Miami if they can get their shit together, I think there's some questions. Defensively, I don't really worry. I think they'll do well. They've got some lineup flexibility, multiple quality defenders, and right now they're 4th in the NBA in total points per possession allowed at .964. It's the long-term flexibility on the other end that I worry about. So who do they turn to when savvy teams load up on Embiid to challenge his weaknesses? Their most promising bounce creators, Maxey, Curry, Shake Milton, are each capable on the offensive end, but they can be targeted by bigger scoring wings on defense. And then the whole story with Tobias Harris has been about simplifying his scoring repertoire. In that case, with those things in mind, wouldn't it make sense to consider flipping one of your prize pieces for a star who's a better fit? I have to wonder if the short-term vibes of a strong start could handcuff the long-term moves that might end up raising their ceiling. Daryl Morey said no to that before the season, at least in a public forum.
You think they can play together?
Absolutely.
Why do you think that? How does that work?
Well, just recent evidence. When you put shooting around Ben and Joel, they were literally the best lineup in the league. And I'm not talking like they played 50 minutes together. They were playing thousands of minutes together.
Joel Embiid's rare gifts have taken him to places that were unimaginable back in 2011. What kind of unimaginable places are on the horizon for his team in the coming years? Philadelphia is a rowdy vibe when they bring home the hardware, but the Sixers haven't done that since 1983. They are dying for the chance to eat horse shit and fire up the winning song on the last day of the season. It's not solely on his shoulders, but the glory, or lack thereof, in the coming phase of JoJo's career is going to be heavily influenced by how much more he's able to add. Let me know if you agree.